Welcome to episode 4 of the Small Credit Union Spring Training Series. Presenting today is Pam Thornton. She's the Director of Strategic HR Services at the Employer Associations of the Northeast. So she's going to cover the gamut of things today regarding HR and the challenges that we face in today's market with AI and remote work. So I'm going to turn it over to Pam. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dean. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for having me. It is an absolute pleasure to be a partner with the Cooperative Credit Union Association. As an association here at the Employers Association, we love the opportunity to get in front of all of you and share what it is that we do in hopes that we can support you through our partnership. So thanks for being here today. Looks like we've got quite a few people. This is set up as a Zoom meeting. I think everybody except for Dean and I does not have their camera on. What I'll share is we are being recorded. This is an interactive session. So hopefully I get to see your faces and hear your voices. The best way for us to take away as much as we can from the time that we have together, which is just about an hour, is for everybody to interact. So hopefully we can do that. And you've already started. So thank you for jumping into the chat and sharing a little bit about what leadership means to you today. It certainly is challenging, there's no doubt. And some of the other things that people have shared, we have to be accommodating. We need to adapt. Sometimes we feel like, I don't know about you, but I feel like Gumby. Backwards, forwards, sideways, up and down. And we do need to be that guidance and guide. That truly what is what leadership is about, is really being able to guide, team build and produce results, really. So today we're going to talk about leadership and how it's changing, navigating it through the workplace as it continues to evolve, quite frankly. What I'm hoping you'll take away from today's session is really understanding and learning about what right now, as we sit in our seats, the workplace trends look like for 2025 and how they potentially will impact you, what impact they have on you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some adaptable leadership strategies and hoping that you'll walk away with some tools to help you lead through change. I know many of you are, most of you, I think, are leaders on this call. And if you're not, you're leading, you're not maybe not leading people, but you're leading process, and you might be leading your organization. So hopefully you'll take away a few nuggets today. So thanks for being here. So we'll jump right in. Did I get there? Okay. Yes, I did get there. And this is what we're going to talk about today. I'm sure you don't recognize this guy. He's from the 18th century, but maybe you do. You never know. This is an 18th century European French writer and philosopher named Voltaire. And, he talks about uncertainty. It's an uncomfortable position. And it's also an absurd one, right? When we think about that. So when we think about change in general, I mean, the pace of the workplace and the transformations that we're going through right now are rapid. They're certainly relentless in some cases, and they're redefining us as organizations. We've got things like shifting employee expectations. We've got global market dynamics, local market dynamics. Change is no longer, a phase. It's really, it's a constant, even though we've always thought of it as a constant. It's had phases, but I feel like every day we're going through change. So, we're navigating a lot of advancements in AI. I don't know about any of you, but it is infiltrated every bit of my work life, and not always in a bad way, right? So hoping that we can get some perspective about that today. We've got hybrid work models that I know we're still dealing with, people returning to work, working through the hybrid remote situation. leadership norms that are continuously evolving, and then the rising demand of what I call the purpose-driven culture, because it really is all about culture when we think about leadership and our relationships with our employees. So, in the past, evolution of change, was something that could happen over weeks, months, sometimes years, but it's really something that's happening quite rapidly, and we have to adapt. We have to be agile, and we need to do it with purpose and empathy and prioritizing continuous learning to stay ahead of the curve, to be able to battle what we're dealing with talent and all of the emerging AI that is entering our workforce. So uncertainty is something that certainly, no play on words there, is going to be continuing for us. So we're going to talk about these workplace trends. I'm going to kind of take them one by one, but just to give you kind of a high level overview, I call this kind of the menu of opportunities right now, right? So, our workplaces are powered by AI. Most of them are, on a spectrum, right? We're all looking at, either we're using it, or we're afraid of it, or we're somewhere in the middle. Those of us that are embracing it as we're using it are, finding ways to really help it with some of the functions that, take time every day, right? We call them kind of like the back office functions. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the evolution of hybrid work. We're going to talk about skills-based leadership and what I mean by that. We'll focus a little bit on the economic uncertainty and how we deal with that with resilience. A lot has changed just in the past few months, right? In the places that we're sitting. So, and they weren't going to continue to, evolve. And then purpose-driven organizations, what really is it that drives our organizations and drives our people? And a little bit of a focus on how we lead, and being agile, and being able to do it without completely, coming apart at the seams, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, Ron, you graduated from high school with Voltaire. That's very interesting. Thanks for that. Adding a little humor there is always good. So first up on our menu of opportunities here is really talking about AI. And we know that it's everywhere, from the chatbots to fraud prevention, fraud protection, predictive analytics. I think there's a real benefit in some cases when we use AI. I mean, we can't fully trust everything that's out there, but when could we, right? And when you go and you Google something, it's still, you have to be really conscious about where you're getting the information from, right? So we have to be able to balance this innovation that we're presented with being responsible, right? Especially in, the industry and the workplace that you are in, being very regulatory, right? So I think, when we look at decision making in general, that's a real key example for me when I think about, no matter who you are, using AI and making sure that, our decision making, not only looking at the information to make sure that it's actually accurate and backed up by, real data that we get from a trusted site or trusted resource, but they're also not being biased by what we're seeing, right? And not kind of making it up as we go along. So I think one of the things I'd like to invite everybody to embrace is that we are in a state of trying to figure out how we use AI and humans, right, to collaborate together to make those success stories that really are happening as a result of using AI. And it's not an either or, right? We don't really have the opportunity, I think, at this point to just ignore AI. There are definitely, environments like yourselves where it's probably limited. And I'd like to hear about that. When you think about AI in your organizations, and if you aren't using them, if you aren't using AI tools right now, what might you be open to using AI for in terms of your processes? What could be improved with AI as you start to think about this, because I think most of the time in regulatory environments, it's very limited. So um, feel free to come off mute if you want to. I think can only see um, one of you, so it's good to make eye contact with you. And is it Bouvet? S. Bouvet? What's your name there?
Yes, it's Samantha.
Samantha. Nice to meet you, Samantha.
Nice to
And
meet
it doesn't
you.
have to be you necessarily. I'd love to hear from others, hop in the chat or come off mute. But what's your thoughts here? When you think about your credit union, what's one process that you might be able to improve with AI?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've only used AI for like our social media a little bit
Yeah.
in my
Hmm.
role. I don't know if they're using it anywhere else in the building.
Yeah. So let's talk about the social media piece because that's a really great one to start with. So when you think about social media and you think about using AI, are you using it for ideation to help you come up with some ideas about what to post?
No, I've used it recently. We have in the town of Athol something called the River Rat Race. So I needed an
Yeah.
image of a rat in a canoe floating down the river. So
Hmm.
I
So
was
you
able to
used it
generate
to
it.
get a graphic from
Yep.
that? Okay. Which is kind of neat. Did it come out okay? Because
Yeah, it
sometimes
was
it's a
cute.
little, yeah, sometimes it's a little odd. So that's definitely one way, right? If you're using it in your marketing materials, I think that's great. The other thing I would say is ideation. So coming up with an idea and using it to help you flesh out an idea can be a really great way to do that. So, which is what you did with, getting the river rat. So that's fantastic. What else?
Yeah, hi.
Yes, Ron.
Yeah,
Hi.
thank you. What we're using it through Posh. We've been Posh.ai. We just started up with this product they have called Knowledge Assistant. So it's really going to be a great uh, benefit, I think, to all employees, but especially new employees. So, when someone calls in or someone's in person in the lobby or emails, and they ask a question,
Hmm.
and especially a new person, they may not know it, so they got to go to a manager. They have to stop what they're doing, put the person on hold, disrupt the manager, and find out what's the answer to this, especially if
Mm,
it's a question that doesn't come up that often. So the knowledge assist just has everything that's fed into it, whether it be policies, procedures, anything that you can think of,
excellent.
outside sources, right? Kind of like a Google on steroids.
Yeah,
And that's what we're going to have. Well, that's what we actually have, and we're trying to build up the database now. Uh,
that's excellent. And it's
yeah.
called Posh, Ron.
Well, yeah, Posh.ai. There's other companies that offer it as well. And I was
Yeah.
thinking another application that would be probably beneficial. Fortunately, we don't have much delinquency, knock on wood. But delinquency is something that can be awkward both for the credit union employee, the collection
Mm,
person, especially if it's a small credit union, it could just, be a manager or someone that does that.
right.
They got to make that call to probably a member that they know. The member sees it. They don't usually answer the call because they screen it.
Yeah,
Um, it's a little impersonal, but I'll tell you what, if I was behind on a bill and I needed to be reminded, I think I'd rather be contacted by a chatbot or some kind of AI
absolutely.
email. And
Yeah.
so that could be a way, that could just be some efficiencies there.
Yeah, it's really adding to that level of customer service. That's what I'm hearing anyway,
Mm.
right? So, it's not a human, right? But it's, helping to, overcome some of the hurdles, right? With the delinquent piece. I know the dentist uses AIME, AIMEE, right? And I literally got a call or got a text yesterday from them saying, "Hey, we missed your call." It went when I called, it went to their voicemail, so I just hung up, and it said, "Hey, we missed your call. What can we help you with?" And I was like, "Wow, okay." So yeah, and it was just rescheduling an appointment. So it is augmenting customer service. So that would definitely be a way, I think, to utilize it for sure.
Yeah, I think we probably all experience that dentist and doctor type of contact. I think they
Yeah.
do. I think they go to the other extreme where they, at least mine does, where I get a text, I get an email, I get phone calls. You still
Yeah.
want this appointment that you set up. It's a little
Hmm.
annoying. So I
Yeah,
think there's a balance there
it is.
too.
There is a balance. Absolutely. I want to, just talk a little bit about the ideation piece again. And I know some organizations, some credit unions are like, we don't want you using it at work. I think there's a lot of people that are using it personally too. So I don't know what the stance is necessarily on that, but you can use it for things like help me, design an email about a sensitive situation. Sometimes when we're faced with a sensitive situation, we've got our own mind block, right? And we don't have a template that we can pull or, someone to call necessarily. We might need some help with that. Doesn't mean you have to do a copy and paste, but to get the wheels moving sometimes with whatever it is that you're writing, I find that can be really useful too. So I wanted to just kind of float that out there. Other ideas from anybody that you want to share?
Pam, good morning, Pam.
Good morning. How are
you?
you?
Good.
Good.
To your point, yeah, I've actually used it for certain emails when they're like delicate situations or topics. Anything, I mean, sounds silly, but sometimes even just to kind of like tweak what you're thinking in your mind that might come out kind of harsh or, like keeping it, work professional, something like that. So it's been helpful for that. We've actually used it to kind of rewrite a couple of policies. To Ron's point, we've, to change the wording, or when we've come up with new policies. And it's actually helped me. We created what we call now a recharge day, but we basically gave a paid day off between March and April to employees. And I was like, what are we going to call it? I don't want to call it discretionary or vacation. So I actually used it to kind of come up with the name for that. And it hit with the board. So it's, really helpful. I mean, we're careful as to who is allowed to use AI within the company.
Yeah. Sure.
Right now it's mainly my like HR and marketing and other, senior management, but we've got to adapt with the times. We actually have strategic planning next week, and it's a big topic next week. So
it is. And I think I think it was Ron that said this. I mean, I think it can be used out of balance, right? So, we've seen some of those cases, right, where, a lawyer used it for, to talk about compliance, and, they were referencing cases that were made up, right? So there's issues there. So you've definitely got to check it, but it's not going away, I guess is the thing, so jumping in and utilizing it is the point here. So anybody want to add anything else before I move on?
Just to piggyback on that, it's not going away for sure. And I think the sooner that us credit unions, especially smaller credit unions, get involved with it and just get their feet wet a little bit with AI, even if it's something as simple as a chat bot or using it on their website for a search bar, which we also do. At least then when it gets more sophisticated, we've already got some exposure to it. And our members have got some exposure to it, as opposed to just ignoring it, burying our head I'm not saying anyone is, but burying our head in the ground like an ostrich and then going, oh, wow, I better get into this in the 11th hour.
Right. No, I totally agree. I think that's really good advice, and knowledge is power, right? So if hey, we need an introduction to it, maybe that's something the Employers Association works with you on to try to put together a introductory program. So, think about that. Put that kind of in the back of your computer there. We can talk about that if you're interested in that. So moving on, it's definitely something that's top of mind, which is why these aren't necessarily in any order, but I put this one first because I knew we'd have some discussion on it. Okay, so looking at the hybrid work evolution, which is what I call this. Here's another one that isn't going away, right? And I think where we get tripped up is really around, being able to manage this, right? So it's around the performance management piece, right? So setting expectations based on outcomes, and there's a lot of research, there's a lot of thought process around managing by outcome, right? And I think that certainly is it can be a hurdle for us if we are managing people in this hybrid situation. My sense is everybody's at least in the credit union spaces I've talked to, everyone's doing this to some degree. They have different schedules, and there is some opportunity, I think, within it. It is not how do I say this? To be professional, right? It's not something just because we're not looking at you that we don't think you're getting work done. Any one of us that's the leader on this call that has had some dedicated time, working from home, right, on a project, or, maybe it's on a sensitive deadline. We know we can get work done, right? But I think it's about this not being able to see people is a really challenging thing. And for a credit union, I think it's the frontline piece, right? That member service consistency, and that's something that you all pride yourselves on, that personal service and being, able to provide that person in person. So, looking at how that affects us operationally, these hybrid arrangements are challenging. So we have to put parameters around what flexibility and accountability mean for the organization, for the people that work in the organization, and then be able to manage it. Maybe it's not about screen time necessarily, but it's more about what are the outcomes of the work that you're doing, whether it's in the office or not in the office. So, and I know that there's, certainly security and compliance risks too with working in a hybrid situation, for all of you that are in this regulatory space. So would love to hear from you, share with others, right? One of your, maybe a win, or maybe it's a struggle. Yeah, I like to start with the wins. So tell us about hybrid work. Who wants to jump in and share, what's been going on in this space for you? I told you we were going to be interactive. I could call on you,
All right,
but then it would feel like school.
I'll start it for you. I'll start it for you, Pam.
All right, go for it,
We're
Aisha.
4-1. We're 4-1 hybrid, so 4 days in, 1 day off, 1 day, out of office. Obviously, but for those who can be, frontline staff
Sure.
obviously can't be remote. So what we've done for those folks is on a quarterly basis, we have a Nectar employee recognition platform that we use as well. So quarterly, those folks who either choose not to be hybrid or cannot be hybrid due to their job receive bonus points every quarter in Nectar as a thank you, or is something trying to balance it out. Unfortunately, for those, like I said, who can't or just choose not to be hybrid. It definitely, it seems to work. With a lot of companies coming back, 5 days in office, still giving them that 1 day. I think, managers are pretty flexible. Like, you have a set day, we have a hybrid policy that folks have to sign. But we're also flexible within that as well. If you need to change for something, we're okay with it. We don't see a lot of abuse, if you will. I feel like there are those few folks that still try to take advantage and, make appointments or something on their non-hybrid day or whatever the case may be. Those who want to switch their day for childcare purposes, and you're like, okay, well, if you're working from home, you really can't be taking care of your kids. So you still see a little bit of that, but I think it's worked really well. Because when I first started here 3 years ago, there was only like 1 or 2 departments that were hybrid, and other folks were like, well, why not us? So I think it's kind of helped with the employee morale when it comes to making sure, is those who can be remote still have that flexibility.
Yeah. I think that's great feedback. Thank you for sharing that. And I think I heard you mention, and maybe I read into this, but are we doing some kind of remote worker agreement with the people that are working remotely? So you are keeping it very, very specific. And I think, that's the key to this, right? Is that this is an agreement. This is an agreement that has an outline, it has expectations and enforceability, right? And if it's broken, what happens when we break an agreement? We just, we're not able to accommodate, right?
We've had a couple of employees that had to have it revoked for performance. And when the performance improved, they were able to go back.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the bonus points piece for the people that cannot be hybrid, bonus points for what?
So that Nectar platform, so the Nectar employee engagement platform.
Okay.
it's a employee recognition platform that we have, so it entices
Okay.
employees to kind of get together, give kudos to one another. They get
Got
points,
it. Okay.
they get recognition for
Yeah.
volunteering, et cetera. So these points that they earn, they redeem for gift cards and swag and all different stuff. So every quarter
Okay.
we give them a bonus of points. Those people every
Mhm.
quarter get, I think it's like 100 bonus points to put towards whatever they're going to purchase down the line for gift cards and redeem for merchandise.
Yeah. And so it's monetary, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. Is anybody else using that kind of format? Thanks for sharing that, Alicia.
Pam, if I could, I'm Andy from Methuen Credit Union, and all of our offices, desks are forward facing, so member facing.
Mhm.
So we do have a little bit of a work from home scenario, but not much, because of the way the office is set up. The challenge that we run up against is that when we do have someone that, any one of us really, that we try to alternate times away from the office. So in other words, early leave or a day off, work on a Saturday, that kind of a scenario. One of the funny things that I've started to see is that the employees are continuing to communicate, even though they're not on that day, via text or a phone call. We were just talking about it this morning, because people were off on Friday, they were still reaching out to them for different comments and such. And I think, although a small office, we do a much better job communicating, but communication is, the biggest piece of it, to try to let people get away from the office.
Yeah.
Is a challenge, but at the same time, I'd rather have that than not, but at the same, respect their time off as well. And that's something that we run up against, and it's different than work from home, but at the same time, it's in that same sort of category.
Yeah. And we've had, that was way before any of this,
Yeah.
the dawn of, we had flex time. Remember flex time, right? Which is, I think, probably what you're talking about.
Yeah. Version of it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So if I'm hearing you right, they're still communicating about work, Andy, or is it just like, hey, how you doing kind of thing? Or is it?
It's a combination of, but for the example on Friday we had some stuff lined up for a member coming in, had everything all queued up, but that one particular person that picked up the member coming through just went ahead and reached out to the person that wasn't here and
Yeah.
said, hey, what about this, that, and the other thing? And like I said, we're
Right.
a small office. They shouldn't have never done that,
Sure.
but at the same time they did, because thankfully everybody works well together, but it was too easy. It was a too easy process.
It was too easy. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's helpful. And that's just about managing it, right? So, and being respectful, right? So, if you're able to offer that, everyone's got to be respectful of that, I guess. Yeah. Try and
it's
protect
hard.
it.
Yep. Sorry, I go back and forth, but the phone's right next to my computer. Sorry
No
about that.
worries. No worries. I appreciate your input. Thank you. Yeah. And so, Ron, you're referencing here. Yeah, I think, and it's good to know, I think especially, when I think about credit unions, regulatory environments, and this front-facing piece, there is, a lot of divide when it comes to people having hybrid opportunities and not, because of the nature of the work, and then it's always going to be that way, right? So, I think the one struggle that I hear about in this, in this space is, well, I don't get the opportunities that the people that have the hybrid schedule do. So I don't want to do this, and it's kind of like you have to make that decision, right? And it's, there's only so much you can do. That is the job. That's what the job was before, we went to having to go remote, and that's what it is now, right? So it's, yes, we can try to entice and incentivize people, with programs and recognition and those kinds of things, but the job really is the job, right? So it's really making sure that all the things surrounding the job, not just the schedule and where you're working, that all those kinds of things make sense too, which is, kind of the other pieces here that we're gonna talk about. So, yeah, so I think it's really making sure that, when we're talking about flexibility and accountability, especially when it comes to flexibility, because that's what everybody thinks this is all about, is being flexible. right? Where do I get the flexibility? And if you're not able to provide it, having some other thoughts around, okay, how do you fill those buckets for people, right? So really thinking about that. And it is something I think we have to keep talking about. Because we're going to, as we have people turn over, retire, the incoming workforce wants this, right? So does that mean that the credit unions won't be able to, have, or these regulatory spaces won't be able to have, the younger generation? I think we have to really be thinking about that. We've talked a lot about struggle. Any wins that we want to share around the hybrid workspace? I mean, certainly there's the recognition program. I could consider that a win, but it sounds like, Alicia, that might just be you doing that. I don't know that anybody else is using that. Generally, people sound like they're pretty happy with what's going on there around it, which is great. Good. Okay. We can move on unless you have something else.
I was just going to mention, I actually am also at Westerly Community Credit Union, not in the HR department, but in the marketing department. And from a different perspective, I think it also has increased morale. I think that some departments that used to have it, and then it was kind of taken away, and then, given back, and then we implemented this policy. I think not only did it help them with having a more defined policy, but also made it more consistent, since it was
Sure.
Based on department before. Some employees may not have felt like it was fair across the board, or may not have been clear. So I think it also helped with morale as well, to have a more consistent policy in place where everyone has the same rules and same flexibility, or benefit, if you consider that a benefit. And
right.
And especially with the younger generations, I think that other jobs allow it. And so this also allows us to kind of be a little bit more kind of competitive or in line. I know there's a 4-1, so it's may not be as flexible as some who have, fully remote jobs, or, a 2-3 type schedule, but I think it allows a little bit more flexibility to kind of compete with those other organizations as well. So I think those are some of the other wins that I've seen as well, from a different perspective.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think, there's two sides to this coin, right? And if we're too small and we're wearing too many hats, and we just can't make that work, right? We've got to think about, okay, how do we retain and motivate, right? So I think those are the things that, you're referencing some great ideas here. And I think you have to just keep thinking about that. It's not necessarily, a job for everyone. And it doesn't mean, we can't put out there to the, the incoming emerging generations that are, going to be coming into our workforce, all the other amazing things, right, about being able to work here, right? It just depends on what's important to them, and having understanding and conversations about that up front, right? So I think that's great. Yes. And I find that very interesting, Ron, right? So extreme, absolutely. You had to close, and you were able to work remotely, but you had shared branching, right? It sounds like it was challenging. We probably could have a whole nother hour discussion on that, right? But fleshing something like that out, would the juice be worth the squeeze, right? And that's something that people have to really, really think about. And I don't think we think about that until we get into a situation where, we're having trouble getting people in the door to work here. And if we're not there, then, that probably doesn't warrant that kind of initiative. So it's good discussion. I think it's something you have to keep talking about and thinking about and evaluating, right? And for those of you that are doing it, Alicia, who let us off here, really making sure that it is equitable, right? And creating that equity across the board. So I think it's interesting. And appreciate the jump in ideas. So thanks for that. So moving on to other trends. This is the piece around the skills-based leadership that I was talking about. So, our future is skills first. There's no doubt about it. I'm sure you're seeing it. And we do need to be able to shift our mindset a bit from, our job titles to really looking at what is the skills, what is the inventory of the skills of the people that we have working for us and the people that we're bringing in. Really, what is required of the role, and I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing a lot of this in, certainly in the manufacturing space, a little bit on the human services side, and certainly a bit in the regulatory environment where we're really thinking about, okay, does that person need that degree, right? And are we really set up to say no? We're going to hold fast to having a degree being required, right? So, really looking at how does that make sense for us? We're in a space right now and a time where, investing in someone who's on our team is a lot more prudent than, trying to go out to market and find somebody, bring them in, and train them and get them up to speed, right? So really looking at that leadership piece around how do we make sure that the people that we have on our team are doing what we need them to do, but at the same time, looking at areas that we need to potentially reskill them. I would much rather be able to promote somebody, even as small as we are, right? And we're planning, for that succession. I would much rather bring somebody up internally than have to, go to market and, start from scratch, right? So, and we do have to do that to some degree, right? But when we think about our frontline staff, what can they learn from, this upskilling process? What are the things that, and are we looking internally to analyze what our skill gaps are? I think that would be something I'd love to hear from all of you. And you should challenge yourself too, right? To really think about what you could do as you think about those skill gaps to develop that person. So what are we doing around that, around skill gaps on the team? And do we have them? I mean, I know a lot of our credit unions have leadership programs, internal skilling programs for our employees. I'd love to hear from all of you. And let's learn a bit from each other. What are you seeing for skill gaps internally? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, it sounds like AI might be one if we're open to using it, right? So that data literacy piece, potentially. Other thoughts? Customer service training?
I'll jump in.
Yeah,
I
I'd love to hear from you, Lori.
I definitely see skill gaps here, but I'm having a hard time since COVID, believe it or not, trying to reignite. We belong to both leagues, you and the Connecticut League, and we used to have a lot of training in Connecticut, and that's pretty much all changed to hybrid. And I'm finding the hybrid model of training very difficult for a lot of employees. So, I mean, we have CPD online and we do have things that we're trying to do, but I have to say that I don't think it's working at this credit union, unfortunately. So I would love to have some ideas.
Yeah. So as you think about, your, in terms of your partnerships and your internal career pathing trainings, assessments, when you think about that, who's leading that for you? Are you doing that yourself? Are you getting help from others? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I guess I've always been leading it, but by sending them, to training or training myself. And I
Mhm.
find it like increasingly difficult. And I don't know why, to tell you the truth, but it just seems that there is something here. I have another employee who happens to be on this call as well. And she
Mhm.
also does, tries, but like I said, with everything being like a hybrid or a webinar type of thing, and
Right.
I'm not seeing that it's doing the skill training that, we
Mhm.
could really use with that little hybrid and webinar based skills. It's just not really doing it for us. And it's kind of a little bit of a dilemma. I don't know if Kitty wanted to weigh in on that, but I don't know if she can actually, but I'm not sure if she has a microphone on her.
I can
But
There she
try.
goes.
Can you hear me?
yes, I
We can
can.
hear you, Kitty.
Okay.
Yep.
I agree that it is a dilemma. I mean, we're small, and so, it already would be difficult to have people out of the office. But at the same time, I agree with Lori that when the trainings were in person, you benefited not only from the training that was provided, but from the other people that were there and the questions that they asked and the experiences that they shared. And I think that's a lot harder to gain from distant learning.
hmm Yeah. So what you're saying, and I think, Cooperative Credit Union Association, certainly would agree in our experience that, sometimes it just has to be in person, right? So, thinking through, and that's a win for you when you think about the fact that, okay, you might have done the assessment and know what the skills are that are needed, but if you're not seeing it happening from that virtual space, then you've got to think about, how do we be creative, right? You don't necessarily need to send them away. Maybe you make the call to say, okay, someone comes in and, spends an hour or two on some of these specific things. And that might just be enough of a plug-in refresh for people to say, okay, they're invested in me, and there's, partners that you can work with on that. And I know the folks at CCUA would be happy to talk with you about that. So I think it's really looking at that. I've heard that from, not just credit unions, it's all of it was virtual, right? And I think I think Dean and I talked about this earlier too. It's if sometimes they are not focused enough, right, to capture their attention, right? So I think it's a really good it's good feedback for all of us. Anybody else having challenges with that, virtual versus in-person training in general? Not necessarily a skill gap, but it could be.
Well, just
Could be defined that
stating
way.
the obvious, Pam, is that you mentioned in the beginning, well, boy, there's only like no one had, except for one person, Samantha, had their,
Yeah,
their thing on, and
sure.
then myself and a few others put it on. But that's just an
Yeah,
idea of how the detachment is there oftentimes
I
in
know.
online learning, and the temptation is too great. I won't say necessarily to get into personal things on your computer, but certainly that's always there, but also just to
Yeah.
get into other work demands that is ongoing, and you don't have that disruption, or you don't have that
hmm
um that doesn't exist when you're inside of a classroom somewhere.
It doesn't, not in the same way. I mean,
Not the
let's
same
be
way.
honest. We can all check out, right? If we want to check out, and if you're doing that, then you're wasting your own time. But you're spot on, and I'll say that there's some times, and that the trainers that we work with say, I'm not going to do a virtual training unless they do turn their cameras on and they do come off mute. And there's exercises specifically around that. So I'm not saying it can't work, but if we're not set up to do that and we're not bought into doing it that way, we might need an idea, a new plugin about, okay, let's do something in person and see what the return on it is, right? So I think the first thing to say is feather in your cap for identifying, right? So now it's just, what do we do about it? And that's a conversation that you've got to really think about internally and working with your partners, right? So it sounds like for you folks, Lori and Kitty, it's really about the engagement, right? So I don't care what you're teaching, right? So it's really about that engagement. So
Yeah,
there's
no, I totally agree. And it's something
yeah.
that Kitty and I have talked about for quite a while now.
Yeah.
We feel like we made investments in doing the CPD online and anything that we could do online to try to get the training that these people need to move to the next level. And
Yeah.
aside from me actually, or Kitty actually just going out there and holding their hand and doing it, which is what in the past I've always done actually.
Right.
But it's getting harder and harder to do that for me as we're growing and I have more responsibilities to actually
Sure.
train that particular person, all the way up. So I'm finding it difficult to do it myself.
Yeah. And if they're not engaged, you risk losing them, right? I think that's the other piece. And I don't know, I don't want to get in a rabbit hole, but I don't know if it's affecting turnover. If it is, that's an even stronger business case to say, okay, we really need to look at this and figure out. It doesn't have to be a huge, monetary investment, but you've got to put something against it, right?
Right. No, and it actually might be just the opposite. I don't have any turnover. And perhaps, that's what is needed, maybe a little bit of, everybody's a little bit too comfortable, not wanting to progress. I'm 62 years old. I need people to progress because, I've got an end site, a retirement in mind, and really need people to be trained in all these new skill sets, and they're kind of comfortable where they are. Yeah. So yeah, I've got two issues going on at the same time.
Yeah, it would be very uncomfortable though, right? If we don't plan for you exiting and don't have a plan for who's going to take care of those things that they haven't learned it, right? So it's interesting. I think those are discussions, right, that probably need to be set up to have, which I think is interesting. Yeah. Good discussion. You're very welcome. Thank you for jumping in. All right. So this is the scary one for me anyway. Probably because I looked at my 401k statement yesterday, which I probably shouldn't have done. But these economic shifts are constant, right? You folks are dealing, with managing interest rates. The shifts are, pretty crazy. I think, I've even heard from some of our, not necessarily in this space, but some of our other, regulatory and government funded, spaces around layoffs, right? We need to be ready in a time where things are just uncertain, and it's really, really uncomfortable for us to do that. But we have to have a strategy. There's got to be some kind of plan for this, and the only way to plan for it really is to have some scenario planning and risk assessment planning. So what do we do with these economic shifts? How do we deal with it? And if we do have to lay off, do we have people cross-trained, right? So really looking at some of these contingency plans, right? So there's a lot going on. We know that it's only just the beginning, and things are going to continue to shift. So I threw out there, if you're in this space, or if you were in this space, what would be your first 3 moves if you had to make a budget cut by 15%, right? So that would be something I would say as a takeaway for scenario planning. If you want to start thinking about risk assessment, what if you had to do that? What would you do? Right? And so I open it up, and I know, listen, we don't have to be saying names. It probably is labor, right? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's something different. I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts? If you're in that situation, what do you think?
I'm going to drop rates.
Yeah.
That's going to be my first go-to, because we are always high on our rates. As a small credit union, we've always, we have pride in that. But that's going to be one of my first things that I'm going to go to, is I'm going to cut rates a little bit. And I think our members would understand that.
Sure. For sure. That's a tough call though, right? Yeah, absolutely. So, and I know, listen, this is, one of these things where I'm hoping, we all learn a little bit from each other. And some of these things might be natural go-tos, right? But you're all individual. organizations, right? And you're all, I know you're running probably pretty similarly, but you've got your own subjectivity, your own specificity too. So be thinking about those kinds of things, because I think those are things that potentially in uncertain times we want to plan for, right? So thinking about that. Any other thoughts on that one before I move on? Anybody wants to talk about? Okay, we are rounding it out here. So as we think about the purpose-driven organization, you know, we hear a lot about this. And the workforce today, they want mission-driven work, right? And this is right up their alley, right? Our credit unions are extremely mission-driven. So when we think about that, are we really making sure that what we stand for is out there? You know, is it member facing? Is it internal facing? How are you showing your purpose to your staff and your members, right? A stat that comes from Gallup tells me that 70% of the Gen Zs prefer to work for companies that reflect their values. Okay, well, you know, that's most of the workforce, right, that are coming in and coming up. So we really need to be thinking about, you know, how we are showing up out there. What does that look like for us? So are we aligning our mission with the impact that we're making? Thoughts about that? You know, when you think about your individual credit union and how you are visible from the inside and the outside, what is that purpose and that mission? How does that show up for you? What does that impact look like? Is that something that we put focus on and look at? And how do we look at it? What do we do in those kinds of situations? I'd be curious. Share with each other. These are things I'm imagining you're all thinking about as we're bringing in talent and managing talent. What do you think? Any thoughts? You've got partnerships, many of you. I mean, we're on a partnership call right now, right, with the Employers Association. So really looking at the partnerships that you're bringing in to provide benefits to your members. Are you working with, you know, your community groups, your schools, your local nonprofits? What kinds of things are you doing? Volunteerism, is that a piece of the puzzle here? Is that something that you are committed to within the organization and within the structure of your staff? How does that work?
Heather can come in on this one too if she wants, but we're very big into community, as our name reflects. But, you know, and not, you know, we are always volunteering. I mean, we do the holiday basketball tournaments for the schools. We do, I mean, there's just so much. We'd be here all, like, we go on and on. So, you know, WCCU Cares is our motto. So we put that in everything we do, whether it's internally with employees or even, you know, externally with our members. So, you know, and when it comes to our employees and our employee loyalty, you know, I talked about that Nectar platform that we have for our employees. We created an EAC committee, which holds, we try to do monthly activities. It's a committee of employees. It's about 12 of us who come up with different activities throughout the course of the year, whether it's kickball games or whatever we have a paint night tonight for employees. So whatever we can kind of do to get our employees to engage with one another, you know, especially when you have 5 branches across Southern Rhode Island, it's you want to kind of bring everyone together. So we focus a lot on that. We've updated benefits and added benefits and added, you know, vacation days, anything we can do to kind of keep that loyalty, make us competitive, you know, and again, not only for our employees, but our members too. So it's everything we do. It's part of our onboarding. It's just, it's in our day-to-day culture.
That's great. Some of the other ideas that I thought about or that have been talked about are things like, you know, financial literacy, right? So having that financial education program, you know, whether you're doing it with the youth or you're doing it with, you know, maybe it's the underserved or low income, you know, really looking at that literacy piece to really connect.
Heather, can you talk about that? 'Cause we do a lot of that. Heather, can you engage on that?
Yeah, so I was going to mention with just to add to Alicia's, I'll first mention the basketball tournament. That's our biggest event of the year. But what's important about it is we literally host, run, and take on all of the expenses, and then we charge a minimal fee, which is consistent with all of the other local games. I think it's only $5 for adults, $3 for kids, but those funds all of the funds and profits go 100% back to the school booster program. So it's kind of a big deal for us because we are very involved with the schools and show our and that kind of leads to the financial education. Not only are we donating in that respect and being involved in donations and sponsorships with the schools in general, but then we also have a financial education program, and we have a financial education manager who
Right.
has relationships with all of our local school departments. We offer financial education resources and curriculum within the schools,
Mhm.
and we take on that cost and offer it within the schools. And then also on top of that, offer and go out to the schools to do see you for reality fairs and budget presentations. So that way we can kind of show the students exactly what expenses will cost. So the See You for
Mm.
Reality Fair is pretty cool because it will literally go in and show, okay, this is what it's going to cost for electricity, this is what it's going to cost for rent, and it kind of goes down to show them what it would really cost, and then we'll give the average annual salary for whatever job they might think about. So, this is pretty relevant for juniors and seniors who are thinking about going to college and going in a certain area for their degree, and it will show you, okay, this is what your annual salary might look like. And then these are what your monthly expenses are. So it's kind of really eye-opening for the students. And so it's a really cool program that we have.
Yeah.
I think it not only adds that value but it creates those relationships with the community, but it also gets our name out there to all those
Sure.
students. So we also kind of get that brand awareness on the other side of it.
Yeah. So it's a you're getting benefits on both sides, right? So
Right.
it's internal and external, which is fantastic. That's
And then we
great.
offer a financial education center on our website. And then through social media, we make sure that we're highlighting, maybe we do a Tip Tuesday
Mhm.
series. So we kind of highlight some of those features and drive them to the financial education center to show them, um, to provide those resources and be there as, um, to kind of be there as an expert and to help them, not just, you know, to push our products, but to
Right.
kind of help them
Exactly. Have to show the
run.
value, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much for jumping in. Heather, those are great ideas. I'm imagining we're probably all doing something like that, but hopefully you're taking away a few nuggets from what everybody's sharing. Ron, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I know there's a number of smaller credit unions on this call here, and like my credit union, we're 51 million in assets, I guess on a good day, and it's myself and three other employees. So this is four of us. That's not a lot of employees, and I
Mm-hmm.
think many of my peers can relate to this situation. So I think what's really important is, part of our mission is to focus on the financial wellness of our membership through financial literacy, to your earlier point. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a really great point, if you don't have the resources or not quite yet to get fully out into the community, like some other credit unions have, like Westerly, for example, which is awesome initiatives that they have going on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a good bang for your buck is to every time when you do a member loan, like I tell my small staff, it's like, look, after the person leaves, obviously, it's like, look, they came in and they weren't able to get a personal loan, but we're able to actually give them the money they needed for the personal loan through a debt consolidation because they had a lot of 25 to 30% credit cards. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
able to pay them off, save them $1,000 a month, and still give them the $3,000
Yeah.
that they were looking for. And it's just that proverbial win-win-win. And that just
Mm-hmm.
reinforces you know, are really our mission, right? And that also gives some reason and purpose to the people that are working here. Wow, this is really cool. We are truly the people helping people.
Yeah.
And I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but you as an EANE, you can see this is really, you know, so important to
It
all
is.
of us.
Yeah, it's from the inside out, right? That's what's happening. And so, you know, no matter how big you are, no matter how small you are, you're aligning your mission with the resources you have to make impact, right? That's the point of this, is this purpose-driven organization, and making sure that we do feel it from the inside and out, right? So, however you're doing that, you know, with the resources that you have. So thanks for jumping in and adding that. Great ideas and great thoughts. Appreciate that. So kind of rounding out things here, right? This is all about leadership and change and evolution of change and uncertainty, right? So it really all comes down to, you know, the agility of our leaders, the people that are on this call, the people that you work with every day in your organization that are leaders. You're looked to as the ones who are setting the stage, setting, you know, the foundation and driving things forward. So in order to really be able to deal with change the way that we have to on a constant basis here, we have to be fast learners and we have to be adaptable, right? So having some kind of framework for the way that we do that, and not overthinking this. There's lots of different change models out there, but wanted to kind of put, you know, something out there for you to kind of look at, take away, you know, maybe think about, and maybe even think about personally how you are responding to change. Are you agile? And if you think that you are, how is that working? Like, what are the things that show that you've got agility, right? So really personally, you know, reflecting on how you respond, you know, to change when it happens suddenly, you know, when a plan just gets blown up, what is it that you do? How do you respond? So that's something I'd really like you to think about, and really, you know, if you feel like you have areas of improvement, you know, what does that look like for you? And what is your plan, right? So I know we're down at the bottom of the hour here, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We've kind of talked about all the high level, you know, trends and how they potentially could, you know, be affecting credit unions specifically, you know, and really thinking about these and how we apply them in our work. So, you know, looking at AI, how are we dealing with that? Really embracing our hybrid best practices if we're able to do it. If we're not able to do that, again, really making sure that we understand that communication around what it is that we're not able to do because of the way that we show up for our members. Looking at skills-based hiring, skills-based mobility through the organization, really focusing on what that looks like and building those skills, and not really so much focusing on the roles, but planning for that skills-based future first, and really looking at financial resilience. Like, what do we do if things, you know, do change suddenly and we have to have contingency plans? Are we cross-trained? You know, what would be our first 3 moves, right? If we had to make a significant cut. Showing purpose within our organization, really connecting the mission and the values with the community internally and externally, and looking at our own agility and personally challenging ourselves around, you know, how do we respond to situations when plans don't go the way that we need them to? Are we really agile? And if we are, that's great. We should be able to, you know, really define that for ourselves, right? So I appreciate you spending time with me today. I don't know that I have much more time, but would love to open it up if you have questions, things that I haven't covered that you want to chat about. I'm here for those questions. I know that this is recorded as well. The thing that I'll say is I will open this up to all of you if you are interested in, you know, following up after the call. If you have specific questions, whether it's about training or support or anything like that in between, I'm here. I'm open to having the conversation with you. There's my email and phone number as well. We really enjoy our partnership with the Cooperative Credit Union Association and look forward to assisting you in any way that you need to and that we can in the future. So thanks for your time today.
All right. Thank you very much, Pam. If anyone has
You're
any
welcome.
questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat. While you are thinking of questions, I just wanted to thank Pam again for sharing all of that great info.
Welcome.
Thank everyone on today's call for joining us and being as interactive as you were. Next week, we will be, is our last session of the series, and we have Nudge Money and the Reseda Group presenting, both on AI technology, so kind of a follow-up
Right.
to today's topic. Thank you very much again for everyone joining, and that ends our session for today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.